I grew up on the West Coast, born there, raised there. My parents were caring. They provided everything I needed, and I'll probably flip back and forth in my story from third person point of view, something that anybody that was around me could have told you, to how I experienced it and what it was like to be that person. In a lot of ways, my childhood was a combination of really extremely unusual for my generation and also what I would say really privileged opportunities, and I didn't ever give a thought to having the money to do something or having a request that was unrealistic. There was really no limit to what my parents wanted to give their children. And in particular, I can remember being really involved in my dad's life. I was the firstborn, and it didn't ever feel like he wished he had a son. I was just the one who got to go where he went as soon as I could walk, because I was the first child. There were 4 of us ultimately, but as we got able to be included in his adventures or whatever he was up to, he took us along, and he seemed to really enjoy it. It wasn't just a case of a mom saying, "I've got a baby, please take this toddler." But as soon as we could trail around, he took us with him. And he was unique in that he was a lawyer by degree and by occupation, but he was in some ways an environmentalist before that was trendy, before it was even a common way of life or term. So something that did for my childhood was create a very unusual way of life. And they inherited a piece of property and then added on acreage to the extent that they had to have a road dug into the side of a foothill. They had a well dug and water pumped up to a big water tank. They had a windmill installed and the system of converting and storing the energy from the windmill. And the house that we moved into was supposed to be the guest house. And there was a barn, but it wasn't a livestock barn. It was just another building, though it didn't have any indoor plumbing. It was a barn, it was storage. It was where all the electronics and all of the inverter and the converter and everything related to the generator was there. But it meant that my childhood was very unlike anyone around me. We moved out to that property when I was 7, and so I grew up in a place that I spent my time with either my parents, my younger siblings, or running around the property by myself. That was just normal. I was very comfortable taking off for a couple hours to go to the burial grounds of the Native American tribe that owned that property before it became public and for sale, and just spent a lot of my childhood running around alone. We didn't even have a telephone when we first moved up there, so that era of people that grew up talking to their friends on the phone all the time, that just wasn't even part of my world. We didn't have enough electricity to even have lights on. I mean, we were storing from a windmill, so we had limited reserves. The electricity got turned on when it was dark. We didn't have electricity all day long, and when we first moved up there, we lived with kerosene lanterns, and we upgraded to the Coleman camping lamps. We loved it. It was great. It was fun. It was like always being camping, but we also weren't anything like any of our peers. We were always unique. It was always a little bit different. And the odd mix was that my dad decided when I was somewhere between 8 and 10 to run for public office, to run for district attorney. So here we were, these pioneer people, and yet we also were in public life, in parades, going to events to meet people. So it was a really odd mix. It wasn't as though I was never around people, but I was around people in a context that I was kind of always an outsider. At the same time, treated with a degree of deference because my dad was a public official. So in terms of the effect, I met tons of people in tons of pockets of culture in the county. He took me along on all kinds of things. I can remember sitting in rooms of people that spoke almost only Spanish and meeting them, and they were all very gracious and generous, and going to someone's quinceañera because that was part of the people of the county. Things that I probably never would have been exposed to had we only been these pioneer people. But meanwhile, we were actually, it meant that I was kind of always an outsider, treated with respect, but not really ever close to anybody. I just had a really odd life, and it would be really hard to find someone I could relate to, because nobody lived like we lived. I could honestly say that I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed traipsing around with my dad. So I'm told all that started when I was really young, maybe 2 or 3, and he'd go to check on the well or how things were going with the road, and I'd be out there with him running around. And in that way, I grew up admiring him, respecting him, enjoying his company, trusting his advice. And in return, he was the kind of dad that I could tell was always trying to give me the best. He took us on very extravagant trips. You know, an annual trip could be Hawaii or Costa Rica. The environmental thing took us to Costa Rica one year to the rainforest. Or when I was learning Spanish, he decided I should be in Spain. So the 2 of us just went to Spain for a week and rented a car and drove around and stayed in everything from the 5-star hotels to the youth hostels, so that I got the full range of exposure. But he was always interested in being involved in our lives and our way of thinking. I would say that my parents wanted to give us the very best of everything they had, and I knew that. There was a safety in that. But some odd things that happened were, one, their set of priorities really revolved around education. They both graduated, they met and graduated at probably the elite name brand West Coast University. And from my dad's history, which was very blue collar, a dad who grew up in an era that he had to quit school in the 8th grade and worked jobs his whole life to take care of a mom and siblings because the dad died. He came from that kind of background, and the education meant all the difference to him, that it opened doors. And so he had this degree and then got a law degree. And there was always a sense that he tried really hard to distance himself from that kind of a background. And in a way that he wanted it open to his children too. And all my ancestors on my mom's side, they were all degreed people. And to the extent that they had the forethought to, for every grandchild born, they'd start a trust fund, which meant when college came, we weren't thinking about financial aid. We could consider any college anywhere and walk in and lay a check on the table. I never had to consider school loans. It just was all provided for. So I want to say that I came from a place where I lacked for nothing that this world had to offer. I got one year a diamond necklace from my dad, another year a fur coat, another year he took my sister and I to New York, and another year he had me meet him at the ski slopes, and we were constantly being showered with gifts and opportunities. When I was probably in the 4th grade, I went to Washington, D.C. with him and met the representative for our state, got a tour from this man of the House of Representatives, all kinds of opportunities and doors that just aren't always open to people. But as I grew older, there was a little bit of a something. I could kind of describe myself as someone that was compliant. I think they might say differently, but to look at it, I think I was probably a relatively easy child to raise because I was compliant. I wasn't really out to fight. I didn't have a reason to disagree with my parents. I thought their priorities and their rules were right. It was law to me, and I didn't question that.
I recall being an 8-year-old child and being told, loaded into the car, going somewhere to meet people and being told, okay, this is how it works. We're gonna get there, you're gonna meet some people, they're gonna say, hi, how are you? And you are supposed to say, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? And I did what I was told, but I remember getting to an age that I thought, I'm not fine. I'm lying. Every time this person asks me, how are you? And I say, I'm fine. And I'm lying. I don't like lying, but I was taught this is what you say. And so I felt like, you're making me lie. I don't want to lie. But I also don't want to tell this stranger why I'm not okay. This isn't the person I would talk to. I didn't even have someone I would talk to. The best word to describe me before Jesus was restless. Just aching, tormented, restless. And when I think about that, I kind of have to describe my life in 2 layers. One is the internal and one is the external. Because on the outside, I don't know that anybody would have ever known how tormented I was on the inside. It was painful to me. I was miserable. But of all the things that happened and all the people I ever knew, I can remember maybe no more than 4 conversations where I would have let someone know how I really felt on the inside versus what they thought of me based on what they saw on the outside. And one of them being my own dad, who was probably the person I spent the most time with in my childhood, respected a lot, feared in a healthy way, but it's revealing that he demonstrated that he cared in certain ways. I never felt uncared for. I was never not provided for, but clearly I was never satisfied. That started to be a little bit more of something I was conscious of, but I didn't know where to look. My background was the answers are in education. Those were my parents' priorities, and I know that the sacrifice that they made to send me to a boarding school in a suburb of Santa Barbara when I was 13 was a sacrifice. Not so much financially, maybe. We didn't talk about that. I never had any sense of need. But the sacrifice of, I know my dad enjoyed having his children around. So I think it was a sacrifice for them to send us away, but they deemed it important. The value of the education, this was an Ivy League elite feeder school, and that was worth the sacrifice of having your children with you. So I was 13 and went to a boarding school where I was yet again even less less like everyone else. My whole background made me not at all like the baseball commissioner's son and the other people that were students at the school. So again, I came from a place that was so different, and there were a couple of friends I had there who were a little bit more just real in my eyes. But when friends took me home and I would go to a home in Laguna Beach and meet their nanny and their housekeeper and their world, and it wasn't a sense of, oh, I can't handle this, I feel like I don't belong here. It was I don't like this, I don't want this to be my world. Part of what I'm trying to describe is just the extent of things I really was exposed to, and by my parents' efforts, doors that were open to me. Did I want to learn to play that game? I could have. Did I want to pursue having a future in a big home in Laguna Beach? I could have found a way to pursue that. They were opening the doors for me to have that kind of life. But I didn't find it appealing. I didn't want it. Whatever that thing inside of me that was looking, I was hitting dead ends at every one of these turns. And I think there was even a distinct moment with my dad when he gave me one of his extravagant gifts. And they always were. And I was always very grateful and told him so. I didn't insult him for not filling this thing in my heart. But I did become aware somehow that he was giving me the best he had, but he didn't have what I needed. He couldn't give me what I was really looking for. And I think he started to sense it too. So there was kind of a change in that
I started to kind of make my own choices. Now, we were positioned to make our own choices early on because my parents thought that was part of preparing us to get by in the world. They left important choices to us. Which one of these Ivy League prep feeder schools do you want to go to? That was totally up to us. They took us to the 3 they thought qualified, and then of those we were accepted to, which one do you want to go to? The decision was just left to us. You're 13 years old making these decisions, but that was part of their way they thought of preparing us to be adults. I was the oldest of 4. I had a sister 2 years younger, and there were things that happened between us that were part of what affected me. We were in a lot of ways opposites, and part of it came out in high school. Before that, we were just sisters, and normal sister Henri treatment of each other was just part of our lives. But we got to high school, and she was the glowing social magnet kind of personality. It was really obvious. So we'd be in social circles and she would have a crowd around her wanting to talk to her, and she knew how to smile and talk and carry herself. And not only was I not good at it, I wasn't sure I cared enough to want to be good at it. It just wasn't really me, but I felt it. I felt the stigma of everybody loves my sister. And one day, I was probably 15 or 16, one of my close friends came home, and my parents had kind of a photo gallery area. She walked through the room and saw a picture of this sister, and she said, this was a friend, by the way, who was not, she was a really sweet girl. I have no reason to think she was trying to hurt me or make a dig. And I, as an adult, can look back and say, she probably didn't mean it the way I heard it, but it changed my life. She walked in and saw a picture of this sister and said, your sister is so pretty. She doesn't look anything like you. And I immediately thought, okay, I'm the not social one and the not pretty one. And it set me up for a priority of how can I make myself special? Because I'm not the pretty one, I'm not the social one. What am I gonna do? And it led to things like obsessions about my weight, because I can't fix what kind of nose I have. I can't fix whether or not people are drawn to me like a magnet the way they're drawn to my sister, but I can make sure I'm never fat. Well, that leads to all kinds of things that everybody knows about, like bulimia, which I definitely went through, and some things that just really were part of my world without even being aware of how unhealthy and things happening, and my parents having no idea how miserable I was. I'd be in social settings with my sister. She was pretty. She knew exactly how to talk, the body language, the smiles. She was so good at it. She could walk into a room and everybody would love to be with her, and I would be standing there feeling like a wallflower. And yet, it happened a couple times, and I would just observe and think, I could learn that. That's learned behavior. How to hold your head, how to smile, how to engage people. I could learn that, but I don't want to. That's a game I don't want to play. I'm not interested in that. And that's not to insult her. I'm just saying she was a natural. I wasn't. But I recognized that people learned how to do that, to function with their peers, to not be outcasts. And I also distinctly didn't want to play that game. I was not at all interested in playing a game. There was something about it to me that represented a falsehood, and I didn't like that. I wanted to just be who I was. And I knew that meant I'm not going to be in the center of any social circles, but that's okay. I just want to be who I really am. I had this kind of driving sense of there's something I lack. And I think enough of all this combination of things of not being just like everybody around me, whether I didn't always know if it was because I grew up very differently than they did. But then in high school, when my sister, who grew up the same way I did, but was completely able to step right into that world of high school and fit in like she belonged, and I didn't. Then I recognized, okay, there's something more than just the way we grew up. And there's something that I'm looking for and it's not here. And I don't like a false-faced thing. I don't like the idea of pretending I'm happy and putting on smiles. I'm looking for something and it's not here. I don't want to play that game. I wasn't interested in that. I was actually trying to figure things out. My last semester of high school, I had a psychology course. And part of my question in life was, why is it that my sister just fits into this world and is perfectly content, and she plays the part without even trying. She looks like she belongs and she looks very happy. And I'm neither happy nor content nor interested in playing that game. So what's wrong with me? What makes me so different from all these people around me who look really happy with this game they're playing? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be a psychology major because it's supposed to be about why people do what they do. So I want to know. I'm going to study psychology. I didn't know to go anywhere else for answers. I knew the world of academia and education as the place that you learned what you needed to learn about life. So that was my chosen major. I had all the required courses. So with that in mind, I intentionally thought, I've lived in California my whole life. Every time I meet people from another state, they say, oh, you're from California, so you surf and I started getting this question in my mind, well, maybe people are different somewhere else. When it's time for college, I'm gonna look everywhere outside of California because if people are different somewhere, I wanna find them. So I wound up at a small school in the Midwest, and of course, it only took a couple of weeks for me to be really heartbroken and disappointed and realize that people were exactly the same everywhere. I spent that first semester there just alone because I'd gone through high school not afraid to not join in. Part of why I was an odd man out was if something was important to me, I just didn't participate. An example is I was at a winter formal and my date, and there were two other couples with us, and he pulls out a bottle of champagne, and I'm raised by the DA of the county and this is illegal, and I kind of gave him a look like, that is so stupid and I am not gonna do that. Everybody else in the car had their little glass of champagne. I kind of turned my nose up at them and then we went inside to the dance. But that's just to paint the picture of, I didn't say, guys, that's illegal, you really shouldn't do that, that's stupid, but I turned away and I wasn't gonna have anything to do with it. So I did a lot of that in my years of do what you want to, I'm not doing that. But I got to college and I'd been doing this, I mean, everybody who's been there knows high school is kind of that intense social time that if you're an outcast, after a while, you start to be a little lonely. And I got to college and it was the same thing happening. Like I said, I was hoping maybe people are different somewhere. They weren't. So the first semester I spent a lot of time alone. I had some, I don't know, shocking isn't even really the right word, but I saw transformations in the people around me that I didn't like that semester. My roommate was one of them. The very first night we were all on campus, there was a freshman dance. It was supposed to be a get to know each other. Well, there was an older classman chasing her around that night and she said, please don't leave me alone with him. So I said, okay. Well, within a couple of weeks, I walked into our dorm room on them, and I remember the shocking part was, I thought you just asked me to make sure you were never alone. Like, what happened to you in 2 weeks? And there were things like that happening all around me. So I was still kind of just doing my own thing. None of my standards had anything to do with God, really, because I didn't know Him. I thought I was a Christian because in my world, if you believed there was a God, that made you a Christian. I had never met anyone who said, talked, did anything more. So if you had asked me, are you a Christian? I would have said yes. No one ever had though. And I'd never had the chance to have a conversation about what a Christian is because I never met anybody who cared enough to ask me that question. But I thought of myself that way. So I cared about God. I knew nothing, just nothing about Him. And
that first semester, like I said, was really lonely. I wasn't going to the parties. I was the one on campus. I was up every morning, running, showering, going to class. So I was probably the only person on campus I didn't mind early classes. I was always there because I was just there being a student. My senior year classes, I would say that the year that started to really somehow something clicked and God was opening my eyes. The summer before my senior year, I was working at a camp in Sequoia National Park. I had 2 different extreme sets of summer jobs through college. One was at this park. This was the job I loved, but you got paid dirt. You just had to like what you did, and I liked it. The other one was I was a receptionist for a law firm in the Bay Area, which would have been contacts. I was paid double minimum wage. I got good money for learning how to run a switchboard, which was still the old days if you had to know by heart everyone's extension and all that stuff. But after one summer working at the camp, the next summer the receptionist, I opted to go back to the camp because I just liked it. But I found myself again questioning the game that was going on around me, because the whole point of this camp was supposed to be parents sent their children to us for a week. And we're supposed to teach the children how to spend their time during the summer doing something other than watching TV and playing video games. So we worked hard all week long with these children and taught them games and played big capture the flag games, camp-wide games and campfires every night and hikes, and I loved it. To me, I would have spent all day, every day doing that stuff. So it wasn't hard to try to convey how fun it was to the children. But they all loved it too. They had a great week. Well, the campers departed Saturday at noon, and the next round got dropped off Sunday at noon. So the staff had 24 hours to go their own way, do their laundry, do whatever they were gonna do. And the trend was that everybody would go back down to the valley to their respective place they were staying overnight to do their laundry, and there would be a staff party somewhere. And I would go to the staff party, and it would be your typical pool drinking party. And I didn't voice things like this. I wasn't accustomed to having anybody to talk to, but I can remember being there and thinking, guys, we spent all week trying to teach the children how to do something different than what they always do, and we can't come up with anything better than this. You guys are reverting to the exact same thing everybody everywhere is doing. And I know that just being a human, I had to have some kind of an arrogant attitude about it. I mean, I wasn't talking about it, but it created separation from everybody on the staff because I just was kind of appalled. Like, you're gonna do this all weekend? Come on, can't we think of anything better to do? Well, in my life experiences, I go to college and I spent probably at least the first semester, almost the first year, just kind of a lot alone, because I got there and found out that people spent their time at the fraternity parties with kegs of beer and doing the same thing that at camp I was thinking, you can't come up with anything better to do. And what really happened was I didn't have a good enough reason. There wasn't anything in my world other than my own driving, looking for something, and I knew I hadn't found it. But I got lonely enough, I got tired enough of being alone and being the outsider that somebody talked me into going to one of the parties, and I went and I started to like not being alone, having friends. Discovered that I could drink more than everybody else and be more sober. So that just became an avenue of social bonding and or attention or whatever you want to call it, but it was kind of a survival skill of, in this world, this is what people value, and oh, I'm good at it. I always attributed it to the fact that I got up every single morning and ran 5 miles, and somehow
that my metabolism just burned through the alcohol faster because most of the people on campus were sleeping as late as they could and rolling out of bed, hungover, going to classes, and I was still maintaining my world of getting out of bed, running 5 miles, but I'd added all this other stuff because I got tired of being alone. So a couple years go by, and then it's the summer before my senior year, and I'm back at camp, and by now I'm just going along with the staff parties because I've kind of I'm just going with the flow because I've been fighting against trying to swim upstream for a while, but I didn't really have a known goal or a known reason. So I just started to go with the flow. And I get to camp, and this year I'm head counselor, which means I have enough seniority from my previous work there that I don't have my own cabin group. I'm just overseeing all the cabin groups. And so I worked more directly with the camp director. And at some point in a meeting, she just said something like, "You guys do not have to talk." This is a YMCA camp, so in name it's supposed to be a Christian camp. And there were aspects. They had kind of little rituals that you would put into the category of Christian. And up to this point in time, I thought I was a Christian because my whole life I did believe in God. I had moments as a child that I would pray. If I was really scared, I would pray. If I was really worried, I would talk to God. But none of it didn't go past that. I didn't know how to equate God with life. And I'd never heard anything about anything other than what I was doing and thinking. So I believed in God. I thought I was a Christian. I thought this was a Christian camp. How I put together the staff parties, I mean, I had my own level, as I said, of kind of disgust about it, but that was all sort of moral. It wasn't really about God. This summer, the camp director said, "You guys do not have to talk about God with the campers. Just be kind, be honest, be nice, and they're gonna know what God's like." And I walked away thinking, that's not possible. I would never make that connection. How are they gonna make that connection? That doesn't make any sense. And that was probably the beginning of some kind of a rub with something someone was claiming you could do and call Christian. She's the director, she knows stuff, but I don't agree. I don't think that doesn't make any sense to me. I wouldn't meet a nice person and then make the connection, this is what God is like. That wouldn't happen, so how is that possible? So I started to live with that kind of questioning. It just provoked and awakened in me, kind of looking around at life, people, the world. What is Christianity? What does it mean to be a Christian? And from there, things started to pop inside of me. It was like my eyes opened, and I went back to school and sat in a class and had a professor. And this is one of my senior classes, so you're at the point that you're, higher levels of psychology for an undergrad. And she said, the objective is, there's a particular triangle of psychology of how to be, it's called self-actualization is your ultimate goal. And you have to start with your basic needs being met, and it's kind of all the way up to, if you're just going to put it in common terminology, how to be a happy person. You have to go through this process, and this is how to be a fulfilled person. And she said, the ultimate is self-actualization. And I sat in that class thinking, I know what myself is. I don't want self-actualization. I want Jesus actualization. I don't know what that is, but I know that's what I want. In March of my senior year, I met some people that were very different. And I would say for the first time in my life, I met people that I felt instantly able to talk to about anything. And I hadn't encountered that before. Even in college, I had a friend who was incredibly irritating in this way. He would say things like, "You are working so hard, you're getting A's, you're studying, you're doing all the work, and guess what? I'm using my fraternity tests to cheat. I'm gonna get C's and we're gonna walk out of the same university with degrees from the same school, and you're working and I'm getting C's." And it was kind of a nanny. And I was mad because that's not right. What he said is true. It's actually true. The people who are getting ahead are the people who learn how to cheat and find the loopholes and play the game and work the game. Those are the people getting ahead. I was just a straight up, straightforward, honest student. I took courses I wanted to learn about. I chose my major based on, I have life questions and I want the answers. And here was this person who had figured out how to work the system and walk away and make it look like we were equals. And that infuriated me because I was completely disgusted with the fact that I knew it was true. I knew it was true. And I knew that looking around me, it was still the game. And it was a game I didn't like. I didn't like the rules. I didn't even like the game. I didn't want to play the game. But it was as though I was stuck in it. This is the world. This is it. This is life. People who get ahead are the people who figure out how to work it. I don't want to work it. I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be any part of falsehood and cheating and finding loopholes. I don't want that. I don't want to be that kind of person. Is there anybody on the face of this planet who is just a real person? And so, based on wanting to know more about Jesus, I was introduced to some people who, as I said, for the first time in my life, they weren't playing a game. There was something very real. There was a quality that was, to me, it was tangible. I was suddenly in the presence of people with whom I could say anything and they would understand. And I'd never been in that place before. I'd never been around people, even my own dad, with whom I'd had a very close relationship and admired and respected and trusted, but hit a wall. He and I hit a wall when he didn't have the answers I needed. He wanted to give me everything, but he didn't have to give what I needed. And I think unconsciously he knew it as well as I did. It wasn't something we ever talked about, but it happened. There was a finite boundary to our relationship based on the fact that he didn't have what I was looking for. Well, here I was with these people, and it was, these are real people. I have been looking for real people my whole life. I could talk to them about anything. I could ask them any question. And our conversation was about Jesus. And early on, they described to me the gospel, that Jesus does wash away your sins. He forgives guilt. He can make you clean. That thing inside that's been driving you, the shame and the fear and the baggage, the restless need to find the cure, find the answers that I hadn't found anywhere. And the world itself had been open to me. But here I was with people who were, it was almost like they didn't even have to say anything. I could tell, okay, this is where I need to be. This is where I'm going to find the driving force of my life. And it was amazing. But after, a lifetime, not consciously as a child, of course, but the conscious years of open doors that turned into dead ends, even having been given everything this world has to offer and seeing that it was only a game I didn't want to play, I met people who I could trust, and I wanted to be where they were. and we talked, and I heard what it meant to belong to Jesus, to encounter this man who had fulfilled all the requirements of God. And I knew that there were some. I lived with my own version of boundaries, such as any kind of depression I ever encountered as a teenager. I didn't really ever consider suicide because I had somehow the knowledge inside of me that that's something God doesn't approve of. So I had this sense of God that put boundaries on me, but it wasn't really the 10 Commandments or a list of things. It was kind of I just grew up with a general sense of God. To me, he always was. That was never a question. But I learned in this encounter that that wasn't what made you a Christian. But it wasn't even hard for me. It was like walking into the room I'd been looking for my whole life. Tell me, who is he? What is he? He's what I've been looking for. That thing where I went to psychology to figure out, why am I the way I am? Why is everyone else content and I am not? Why does everyone else like to play the game? And I can observe what the rules of this game are and how to play them, and I don't want to, but I can't find anything anywhere that's not this game until I met people who could actually tell me what Jesus was really like, who he was, why he was, what it meant that he had died in my place, that his blood and his place before God could wash away all that stuff inside that I was trying to figure out and solve. And it was as though God had prepared me for that moment, and I just walked into that room, heard who Jesus was, and said, I'm in. Take me there, whatever it is. And I was actually baptized, made full declaration with all my heart that very weekend of meeting these people that Jesus was everything I had ever been looking for. He was ruler, maker. He gets to call all the shots. I don't even care anymore what my favorite color is. All I want to know is what's Jesus' favorite color. What does Jesus like? That's what it means that he gets to make the decisions. I'm just handing over the reins of my life, which I didn't even know what to do with anyway. I was just scrambling all around, looking. I found you. You led me to you. There's a time in the scriptures that talks about, I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And I knew it was like that. I could not, honestly, and never would even try to describe myself as some kind of diligent seeker of God. I wasn't. I didn't even know how to look for him. And I was not a strong-willed, never give up kind of person. But God saw all these things and he arranged them and he used them. But ultimately, if I had not met these people, I would have been floundering to this very day because I couldn't find anybody to tell me what I needed to hear, which was the reality of who is Jesus. And so what do I do with my life? If that's who Jesus is, okay, so you're not a nun or something? Like that's, when you think of, in my previous world, someone who's really serious about God is either a nun or a missionary somewhere. That's all I would have thought or had any sense of. How do I make my whole life God's? How do I do that? It wasn't confusing, it wasn't hard, it was like I was prepped for that moment. And that was even what one of the people that I met said. It's like God did all the work and you walked in and we told you something he needed us to put the words on for you because he'd prepared you. And I was right there. Absolutely. Count me in. I am all in. I am very happy to say goodbye to the world. Hello to Jesus. Take over. My life is yours forever. And some of the nature of scandals and the cross came later for me because I was simply overjoyed to have found my Maker, my Lord, my Redeemer, my King, my hero, this person who had rescued me from the guilt within. It's very real to have your guilt washed away. And anybody who hasn't experienced that needs to know it's only a good thing that it's ahead. It's possible. Your guilt can be washed away, that you don't carry around this garbage inside that you don't know what to do with. And that was what happened when I met Jesus and was washed in his blood and raised to new life as his disciple, having given him full authority over my life. And it's really important to say that had I not encountered these people, I don't know when I would ever have heard what I needed to hear to put the pieces together. I would very easily have still been rambling down the road and lonely enough to go with the flow instead of fighting upstream for some unknown reason. You do that for a while, but then without a good reason, ultimately loneliness overcame that. I still didn't like the game, but as I said, anyone can learn to play it. And I'm really grateful that Jesus saw fit to reach in and rescue me, because I didn't even know to look for him. I did not know that he was the answer, but he knew, and he sees, and he worked with things in a world that didn't have, as I said, any overt declarations of who is Jesus and what does that mean for your existence, the meaning of the universe. People talk about wanting to know the meaning of life, and to me now, where I sit, it's very straightforward, simple, easy, clear, wonderful. Jesus has a plan. And when I read scriptures like, it's not with silver and gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you by your forefathers. I read that and it just struck me in the face. Yeah, they gave me their best, but it was an empty way of life, that all they had to give me, all their best, and it was, they withheld from me no good thing, but everything they had to give was an empty way of life. And I knew it and I felt it. And I grew very grateful to God for, in some ways, the misery of all those years, because I looked around me and most of the people I knew loved it. They were just plugged into it and perfectly content, and somehow God allowed a discontent to be maintained so that I was never so plugged in that at lifting my chin and carrying me on eagle's wings, I was so happy to be rescued.
The truth and his glory shining through night, I inhaled at first scent, my all knew 'twas right. No longer aching for others who see life as I do, God's brought them to me. My heart has yearned since the day of my birth to find true reality in lives upon earth. In those who live to love God, this truth is found. It's more than the all to discover I've been bound. Seeking and longing to no other avail, till he called me home, once I found his trail. I am at home here, my life I have found. My dwelling is God, to his children I'm bound. Together we're called to fight the good fight, to put on the King's armor and let flow the light. To lay our lives down and hearken to his voice. Having met Jesus, I need no other choice. Like the prodigal daughter to my father I've been, he now touches my life by way of his kin. No matter what you probe, my heart only aches. With love for the King, all he's due is at stake. Such a gift he has given, and how he has cared to show me his kingdom, and the others he's spared. From ceaseless longing to know the truth, he gives us loving and even more proof that he is our home and we are his children, chosen for a purpose, called into such freedom that my soul now does fly, nay, it soars at the sight of my Father transforming his children in the light. His purpose is greater than our singular lives. God binds us together to be his pure bride. Jesus says he'll return when his bride has prepared to be an equal yoke worthy of all God has shared. I am at home here, my soul has found rest, with the others he nurtures to pass through the test. On that glorious day, when Jesus shall appear, this time to claim his bride so dear. Let us all be ready to meet Jesus with glee, for on that day every eye shall see that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Seek him now, let's all be his wife.